My name is Riley Adams, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a digital marketing consultant, building campaigns for small businesses, and it's not a glamorous job, but it pays well enough to cover my expenses. Or at least it did, until I realized I had been covering everyone else's too. You see, my family isn't what you'd call supportive. I'm the one who always stepped up when things got tough, no questions asked. While my step-siblings lived their lives without a care, I took on the financial burden of the entire family. I paid the bills, kept the house running, funded my stepsister's university tuition, and even made sure my stepfather's business didn't fall apart, all while keeping it a secret. I didn't expect a thank you. I didn't even want one. But what I didn't expect was the constant ridicule from them, the way they took my sacrifices for granted and treated me like I was invisible. My stepfather, Tom, was the worst of them all. He made it a point to belittle me for my career choices, constantly mocking me for not following the traditional, successful path. Digital marketing, he would scoff. What is that even? Sounds like a waste of time. You should have been more like your brother, running a real business. I could never win with him. I spent years keeping quiet, suppressing my anger while I kept the house afloat. Every time he made fun of me, I reminded myself why I was doing this. Because they were my family. Because they needed me. But deep down, I knew I was drowning in their neglect. And then there was my mother. She had always been distant, but lately, she seemed to have completely turned her back on me. I'd approach her, trying to explain how exhausted I was from carrying the load of the family, but she just told me to stay quiet. Don't make a scene, Riley. Just keep doing what you're doing. This is what family does. It wasn't that she didn't care, it was worse. She didn't care enough to even try. The words stung every time she dismissed me, but it was her silence that hurt the most. She couldn't even be bothered to stand up for me when Tom and my step-siblings were treating me like a joke. But the last straw came one evening after dinner. Tom had made one of his usual jabs about my career. This time, though, something inside me snapped. My stepsister, Emily, was sitting there, smiling smugly, clearly amused at my discomfort. My brother, Kyle, didn't even look up from his phone, ignoring the tension in the room. My mother, predictably, didn't say a word. I felt the weight of their indifference pressing down on me, suffocating me. I'm done, I said, my voice steady but firm. I'm done paying for everything. You're all on your own now. The room fell silent. Tom's face twisted with anger. What did you just say? You think you can just stop helping out because you're tired? Get a grip, Riley. This is your responsibilities. No, I snapped. It's not my responsibility. I've been covering for all of you, but no one ever asked how I was doing. No one ever cared how much I sacrificed. You mocked me, belittled me, and I'm done with it. I'm leaving. Don't be ridiculous, my mother muttered, finally speaking up. Where are you going to go? You don't have any place else. I'll figure it out. You don't need to worry about me anymore. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and with that, I grabbed my bag, heading for the door. I could feel their eyes on my back, but I didn't look back. I'd had enough. Leaving the house was the hardest thing I'd ever done. It wasn't just about walking away from them. It was about walking away from a part of myself that I had given to them for years. I wasn't just abandoning the family, I was abandoning the person I had become because of them. But it was time. They had taken too much, and now it was my turn to take something back. My independence. The first night out of the house was strange, quiet, and lonely. But it was also freeing. I didn't have to pretend anymore. No more pretending that I wasn't being suffocated by their expectations, their neglect, and their manipulation. But as the hours passed, something inside me started to shift. I couldn't just leave. I had given so much, and they had taken it all for granted. They had humiliated me. They had ignored me. And now, they would have to face the consequences of their actions. I had been the one to hold them up for so long, and now I was going to make them see what it was like to stand on their own without me. The next steps were simple. I would expose them for who they were. And when the dust settled, I would walk away knowing that, for once, I had done something for myself. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them get away with it anymore. And as for my family, They were about to learn the hard way what happens when you take someone for granted. It's funny how quickly things can change when you stop giving. When I left the house, I thought it would be a relief. But there was still that gnawing feeling, anger, frustration, and a desire for justice. I couldn't just walk away without making sure they understood what they had done to me. I had spent years silently supporting them, and now it was time for them to face the consequences. I didn't have a clear plan at first. I just knew I needed to expose the truth, make sure everyone saw the toll their actions had taken on me. I started small, gathering evidence, going through old bank statements, and uncovering every little thing I had been paying for: the mortgage, utilities, Emily's tuition, Kyle's ridiculous credit card bills. They had taken me for granted for so long, using me without a second thought. But now I was going to use the information. I had to turn the tables. It was a Saturday morning when I finally put everything together. I spent hours typing out an anonymous email, attaching screenshots of every single transaction I had made on their behalf, all the bills I had paid under my name, and even records of the conversations where they had mocked me for being just a digital marketer. The family was so used to me handling everything that they had no idea the web I had woven behind the scenes. I included everything, every bill, every loan, every expense they thought I would just keep quietly paying. The email was straightforward, nothing too dramatic, just the facts. But the sting would hit them harder than I anticipated. I sent it to every single person in the family, including my mother's closest friends, my stepfather's business associates, and even a few of the neighbors. I wanted everyone to know how they had used me, and how I had been left alone to carry it all. I waited for hours after I sent the email, watching the clock tick slowly. I knew it wouldn't be long before they found out. The moment my phone rang, I knew exactly who it was. Riley. My mother's voice was a mix of shock and fury. What have you done? How dare you send that to everyone? You've destroyed everything. I stood up, pacing around the small apartment I'd rented. Destroyed what, Mom? The facade you've built of being the perfect family? You've all been living off of my hard work, and you never even acknowledged it. You treated me like I was invisible, and now you want me to feel sorry for you? You've made your bed. Now lie in it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't say anything. I did everything for you, Mom. Everything, I added, my voice cracking with emotion. And you never once said thank you. Not once. You just let him, Tom, make fun of me, and you stood by while they used me. Don't you dare bring up Tom, she snapped. You think this is all about money? That's what this is. You think I don't know what you've been doing? You think I wanted this for you? I cut her off before she could finish. You wanted me to stay quiet. You wanted me to keep paying, keep pretending everything was fine. I'm done being your punching bag. I'm done being your financial safety net. I hung up, leaving her to stew in the mess I had created. The fallout from my email was swift and much more public than I had ever expected. Within hours, Tom's business partners were calling him, asking questions about the sudden and suspicious debt. Emily's university contacted her, asking why she hadn't paid her tuition fees, and Kyle's credit card company froze his account. The neighbors, who had always seen me as the dutiful daughter, the one who never complained, were shocked when they learned the truth. But it wasn't just my family's financial downfall that took the spotlight. What really stung them was the public humiliation. Tom's colleagues had no idea what had been going on behind closed doors, but now they did. And Emily, who had always prided herself on being the perfect daughter in their eyes, was suddenly exposed for what she was, a spoiled brat who never had to work a day in her life because I had been paying her way. For the first time in a long time, I felt a rush of satisfaction. The weight of all those years of silence was lifting, piece by piece. But there was still more to do. They had to learn more than just the financial truth. They had to feel the consequences of how they had treated me. I called up one of my old colleagues, someone who had connections in the legal world, and asked for advice. What could I do to make sure they would never forget how they had used me? I wasn't going to let them off the hook that easily. I was going to make sure they paid for their cruelty. That's easy, my colleague said. You could file a lawsuit. If you can prove that they knowingly benefited from your support without compensating you, there could be legal grounds for you to take action. It would be messy, but it would certainly make them think twice before using anyone else again. The thought of dragging them into court was tempting. The idea of watching my stepfather and step-siblings squirm as I laid bare their greed and neglect was like a balm to my soul. But I knew that I couldn't just leave it there. It wasn't just about money or getting even. It was about showing them that I would never be anyone's doormat again. I spent the next few weeks gathering more evidence, preparing for whatever came next. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. I had taken the first step by exposing them, but there was more to do. They were going to regret ever underestimating me. The weeks following my email were a blur. The storm I had unleashed in my family's life didn't show any signs of dying down. Every time I checked my phone, there was a new message, another complaint, a new confrontation I had to face. But nothing compared to the day Tom called me, his voice shaking with a fury I had never heard before. "Riley, I swear you're going to regret this. You've ruined everything. You've ruined me." Tom spat through the phone, his voice harsh and strained. "You've cost me my business, my reputation, what's left for me now." I felt a small twist of satisfaction, but I held my ground. "Don't act like you didn't bring this on yourself, Tom. You've been running that business into the ground for years, while I paid for your mistakes. I wasn't your piggy bank, and I'm not your punching bag either. Get out of my life," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You'll regret this." "I'll make sure of it." I hung up, my hands trembling slightly. As much as I wanted to feel vindicated, there was a small, cold part of me that knew things were about to get worse. He was dangerous when he was backed into a corner, and now he had nothing left to lose. The next few days were spent watching the world around me slowly crumble. Tom's business partners dropped him faster than a hot potato, and without their backing, the company began to falter. Emily, who had been the darling of the family, now had to deal with the embarrassment of being publicly associated with a financial failure. The students at her university had started to whisper behind her back, and her friends were beginning to distance themselves. No one wanted to be associated with a family that was suddenly a laughingstock. Kyle's financial world was crumbling as well. With his credit card frozen and no way to pay off his debts, he was left stranded. And I didn't help him. I could have, but I didn't. For the first time, I realized how much I had been enabling them, fixing their problems without ever being appreciated for it. It wasn't just their financial world that was falling apart. The dynamic of our family had shifted. My mother, who had always sided with Tom, was starting to see the cracks in the facade. But it was too late. She had ignored me for years, and now she was dealing with the consequences of her indifference. I couldn't ignore the small part of me that still hoped for some kind of reconciliation. I wanted them to apologize, to admit that they had been wrong, but I knew deep down that would never happen. They didn't have the capacity for that kind of self-awareness. They only knew how to use people, how to manipulate them. Then came the day that changed everything. I was sitting in my small apartment, sipping coffee and enjoying the rare moment of peace when my phone rang again. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me urged me to pick it up. "Riley," my mother's voice came through, shaking and unsure. "We need to talk. Please just listen to me." I could hear the desperation in her voice, but I didn't feel the sympathy I once might have. I was done. But I let her continue. "I don't know what you've done, but everything is falling apart. Tom's business is done. The kids are miserable, and now everyone's blaming me for it. They're all looking to me for answers, and I don't know how to fix it. I never realized how much you were carrying. You've always been the one to keep things together, Riley, and I never saw it. I was wrong. I should have stood by you." For the first time, my mother was admitting that I had been right all along. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt hollow. I had heard these words too late. The damage had already been done. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "Please come home. We can fix this together." I let her words hang in the air for a moment.
"No, Mom. It's too late for that."
"You made your choice years ago when you stayed silent. When you let Tom do whatever he wanted and let the kids treat me like I was nothing. This isn't about fixing things. This is about me finally standing up for myself."
"I didn't know," she said softly. "Of course you didn't," I replied.
"But you should have. You should have noticed. I've spent my entire life trying to fix things for you. But I'm done, Mom. I'm done fixing everyone else's problems while mine are ignored. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, I spoke again. You're going to have to deal with the fallout, just like everyone else. You don't get to run from it. I've done enough for you. I hung up, not feeling the relief I thought I would. I had said what needed to be said, but it didn't heal the wounds. Over the next few days, the consequences of my family's downfall became even more pronounced. Tom filed for bankruptcy, his business dissolving in the wake of his failed investments. My step-siblings, once too proud to ask for help, were now scrambling to make ends meet. Emily had dropped out of school, unable to pay tuition fees, and Kyle's reckless spending caught up with him when his house was foreclosed. But it wasn't just their finances that were crumbling, it was their sense of entitlement. They were now living in a world where their privileges had evaporated, and they had no one to blame but themselves. As for me, I had never felt more free. I realized that revenge wasn't about causing pain, it was about finding peace. And I had found it, not through my family's suffering, but through my own independence. I wasn't the person who was always going to fix everything anymore. I wasn't their savior. I was mine, and I wasn't going back. The dust had settled, but the weight of everything still lingered. My family's collapse wasn't as clean as I'd hoped it would be. Watching them struggle, knowing they had no one to blame but themselves, was harder than I imagined. But in the quiet moments, I realized it was the only way for me to truly break free. They needed to feel the impact of their actions before they could change, if that was even possible. My phone buzzed again, interrupting my thoughts. It was a message from my old friend, Kelly. We hadn't spoken in a while, but I always appreciated her advice. The text was simple, but its timing was uncanny. I heard about your family. Are you okay? If you need to talk, I'm here. I couldn't help but smile a little. Kelly always knew when I needed someone to listen. I hadn't shared any of the details with her yet, but now seemed like the right time. I called her back immediately. Riley? Kelly answered, her voice warm with concern. What happened? Your mom's been calling me for days, saying you're not answering her calls. I couldn't even imagine what you've been going through. I'm fine, Kelly, I said, sighing. I've been dealing with a lot. I cut ties with my family. It was the only way to stop everything from spiraling. They never appreciated me, and I finally realized that I was sacrificing too much. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. You did what you needed to do. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. It sounds like you've been carrying the weight of the world for a long time. I didn't want to walk away, I admitted. But it was the only way to make them understand. I was never going to get anything back. It was just me giving, and them taking. I get it, Kelly said. But just make sure you're taking care of yourself now. You've got to put your own happiness first. Don't let their mess become your problem again. I took a deep breath, appreciating her words more than she could know. I was tired of being the fixer, the one who held everything together while everyone else lived their lives without consequence. Now it was time for me to rebuild, to find what I had been missing in my own life. A few days later, I received another call, this time from Emily. Riley, she said, her voice flat and resigned. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but I need to talk to you. I wasn't sure how I felt about hearing from her. Emily had always been the one to mock me the most, the one who didn't care about anything unless it directly benefited her. But there was something different in her voice, an exhaustion, maybe, or a sense of humility that I hadn't heard before. What do you want, Emily? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened, she started. And I'm sorry. I was wrong. We were all wrong. We took you for granted and we didn't realize what it was doing to you. Tom, he's ruined everything. I don't know what to do anymore. I could tell she was struggling, but I wasn't sure how much I believed. She had never apologized for anything before, let alone taken responsibility for her part in the mess. Why this sudden change of heart? I asked, my voice calm but guarded. Why now? Because everything's falling apart, Riley, she admitted, her voice breaking. And I don't have anyone else to turn to. Tom's a wreck, and I'm lost. I need your help, but I know I don't deserve it. The words hung in the air between us. I had every right to tell her to go away, to keep her at arm's length. But something in me, some sliver of compassion I still had left, didn't want to be cold and cruel. I'm not going to fix everything for you, Emily, I said firmly. You're going to have to figure this out on your own, just like I did. But I'll help you if you really want to make things right. But that means you need to earn it. There was silence for a moment, and then I heard her sniffle softly. I'll do whatever it takes. A few weeks passed, and I stayed true to my word. I didn't let Emily or the others off the hook, but I didn't make their problems my own again either. Instead, I began building the life I had always dreamed of, a life that wasn't dependent on anyone else's expectations, a life where I finally got to choose what I wanted for myself. I enrolled in a new professional course, one I had been putting off for years. I reconnected with old friends, and slowly but surely, I started to feel the weight of everything I had been carrying begin to lift. Emily, to her credit, started working to fix the mess she had created. It wasn't easy for her, and it wasn't quick, but she was finally learning that she couldn't rely on others to solve her problems. She started taking responsibility for her mistakes, and I saw a glimmer of the person I had hoped she could become. As for Tom, Kyle, and my mother, they were still dealing with the aftermath of their actions, but I had made my peace with it. The years of sacrificing myself for them had taken their toll, but now, for the first time in my life, I was free. And that was enough, that I knew my journey wasn't over. There would always be the temptation to go back, to be the fixer once again. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had learned to stand up for myself, to demand the respect I deserved. And no matter what happened, I would never go back to being the person they thought they could walk all over. The family I had once tried so hard to please had shown me who they really were. But in doing so, they had also shown me who I was meant to be, a woman who could finally stand on her own. And I was never going to let anyone take that away from me again.